The view from the 42nd floor of the Sterling Financial Tower usually calmed me. From here, the bustling streets of Manhattan looked like circuitry on a motherboard, a complex system that I, Bethany, as the chief financial officer, understood perfectly. I controlled the flow of capital here. I made decisions that shifted markets. But staring out at the gray horizon today, the vibration of my personal cell phone against the mahogany desk felt like an intrusion from a different, far uglier world. It was a specific ringtone, the default jarring alarm sound I assigned to only one contact, Frank. Not Dad, Frank. I didn't answer immediately. I let it buzz, watching the screen light up, breathing in the conditioned, expensive air of my office.
My assistant poked her head in, holding a tablet. The acquisition meeting with the board starts in 20 minutes, Bethany. Do you need the finalized portfolio regarding the distressed assets in Pennsylvania? I have it, Claire. Thank you. Close the door, please. As the latch clicked shut, I finally picked up the phone. I didn't say hello. I knew better than to offer a greeting that wouldn't be returned. It's about time you picked up, my father's voice boomed, skipping the pleasantries. It was a voice that used to make me shrink into the corner of my bedroom, a voice that sounded like gravel grinding against steel. Your mother has been trying to call you for 3 days.
Do you think you're too important to answer your family? I'm at work, Frank, I said, my voice steady, practiced. It was the same tone I used when telling the CEO that their company was hemorrhaging cash. I have a board meeting. What do you need? It's not what I need. It's what you're going to do, he snapped. Tyler's wedding is next weekend. We expect you home by Thursday for the rehearsal dinner, and don't give me that I'm busy studying excuse. Tyler, my brother, the golden child, the sun around which my parents' entire universe revolved. I can't make it, Frank. I have responsibilities here, I replied, keeping the details vague. They didn't know I was a CFO. To them, I was still the struggling student, the daughter who took too long to finish her degree, the one who supposedly needed their help. Responsibilities? He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You think reading books in a library is a responsibility? Listen to me, Bethany. You will be there. Tyler wants the whole family together. It's important for his image. The Whitmores are going to be there, and we need to look united. I said no. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and pregnant with the threat I knew was coming. I could picture him in the kitchen of that old house in Millbrook, red-faced, gripping the receiver, probably staring at the peeling wallpaper they refused to fix because all their money went to Tyler's car payments. Fine, Frank said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You want to play hardball? Let's play. If you aren't in this driveway by 5 p.m. Thursday, don't expect another check for your tuition. Not a dime. I'll cut you off, Bethany. You'll be on the street, and don't come crawling back to us when you can't pay your rent. My hand tightened around the phone, my knuckles turning white. Not out of fear, but out of sheer disbelief at the audacity. Tuition. He was threatening to cut off money that I hadn't received in 3 years. He was holding a financial gun to my head, unaware that the chamber was empty and that I was the one holding the deed to the entire armory. You're threatening my education? I asked, testing him. I wanted to hear him say it. I wanted to record it in my memory. I'm teaching you a lesson about family loyalty, he spat. Money comes with strings, Bethany. You dance when we pull them. Thursday, or you're done. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, placing it face down on the polished wood. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. Instead, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. It was the snap, that moment when the last thread of emotional attachment severs, leaving behind only logic and strategy. They thought they were my lifeline. They thought I was the desperate, perpetual student living off their generosity. I opened my laptop and pulled up my personal banking spreadsheet. I scrolled back. 3 years. It had been exactly 36 months since Frank and Deborah had sent me a single cent. They had stopped the moment they bought Tyler that new truck, claiming cash flow issues, but promising to back pay me. They never did. I had finished my MBA and climbed the corporate ladder entirely on my own, eating instant noodles while they threw banquets for Tyler's minor achievements.
And now he was using a non-existent financial leash to choke me. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. The anger was there, burning deep in my gut, but I pushed it down, compressing it into fuel. "Claire?" I pressed the intercom button. "Yes, Bethany?" "Clear my schedule for Thursday and Friday. I'll be taking a personal trip to Pennsylvania." "Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," I said, watching my reflection in the glass. My eyes looked dangerous. "I just need to go home and settle some accounts." They wanted me at the wedding? Fine, I would go. But I wasn't going as the sister. I wasn't going as the daughter. I was going as the creditor. And in the world of business, when a debtor defaults and threatens the bank doesn't get mad. The bank forecloses. I checked the time. My meeting regarding the acquisition of regional debt portfolios was starting. The portfolio included assets in Millbrook. I picked up my tablet, a small smile playing on my lips. Frank wanted to talk about money. We were going to have a very long conversation about money. The drive to the airport was a blur of gray asphalt and red taillights, but my mind was traveling a different road, a winding, treacherous path back to 102 Oak Street. The threat from Frank had unlocked a vault of memories I usually kept sealed tight behind the firewall of my professional life. You see, in my family, there were two distinct roles. There was the star, and there was the audience. Tyler was the star. I was the audience, the stagehand, the one expected to applaud from the shadows, but never step into the spotlight. I remember being 10 years old. It was a humid Tuesday in July. I had spent weeks studying for the state math Olympiad. I was a quiet child, awkward with glasses that were too big for my face because Mom said getting new frames was a waste of money since your eyes will just get worse anyway. I had won first place, a gold medal, a real heavy gold medal with a blue ribbon. I ran home, the metal disc thumping against my chest, imagining, just for a second, that this would be it. This would be the moment Frank would look up from his newspaper, smile, and say, "Good job, Bethany." I'd burst through the front door, breathless. "Mom, Dad, look!" They were in the living room. Tyler, then 6 years old, was standing on the coffee table, shoes on, singing a gibberish song he'd made up. Mom was clapping, her face glowing with adoration I had never seen directed at me. Frank was filming it with his camcorder. "Mom, I won!" I held up the medal, my voice cutting through Tyler's noise. Frank turned, annoyed. "Bethany, keep it down. Tyler is performing." "But I won the math competition, first place in the district." Mom glanced at me, her eyes glazed over the medal as if it were a piece of trash I'd picked up from the gutter. "That's nice, honey. Now move out of the frame, you're blocking your brother's light." I stood there, frozen. The gold medal suddenly felt like a lead weight around my neck. I watched them cheer for Tyler as he jumped off the table, knocking over a vase. Instead of scolding him, they laughed. "He's got so much energy, such a spirited boy," Mom cooed, hugging him. That night, I put the medal in my bottom drawer, under my socks. It never saw the light of day again. As I sat in the first-class cabin of the plane, sipping sparkling water, the memory shifted to high school. The disparity wasn't just emotional, it was financial. It was tangible. When I needed braces, Frank said they couldn't afford it. "It's cosmetic, Bethany. Character is more important than straight teeth." I spent 4 years covering my mouth when I laughed. 6 months later, Tyler wanted to play ice hockey. The equipment alone cost $2,000. Frank didn't blink. He put it on a credit card. "Sports build leadership," he declared. Tyler quit 3 weeks later because the practice was too early, and the expensive gear rotted in the garage. The injustice wasn't a singular event. It was an atmosphere. It was the air I breathed. I became the provider early on, not with money, but with labor. I did Tyler's homework so he wouldn't fail. I cleaned the house because Mom was too stressed with Tyler's schedule. I was the emotional sponge, absorbing their anxiety and dysfunction so Tyler could remain pristine and unburdened. But the real knife in the heart, the one Frank had twisted today, was the college fund.
My grandmother, on her deathbed, had left a specific sum of money. She told me, gripping my hand with her frail fingers, "This is for your school, Beth. Don't let them take it." But they did. When I got accepted into NYU, I asked for the money. Frank sat me down at the kitchen table, looking somber. "We had to leverage it, Bethany. The market was down. We needed to repair the roof."
I found out later there was no roof repair. There was, however, a used convertible for Tyler's 16th birthday sitting in the driveway. A Mustang, red, flashy, dangerous. "He needs it to get to school," Mom had defended, eyes wide with feigned innocence. "You can take the bus. It builds resilience." Resilience. That was their code word for neglect. I had worked 3 jobs. I waited tables, I filed papers, I tutored rich kids who had half my brain but 10 times my resources. I paid for my own tuition, my own rent, my own life. When I finally landed the junior analyst position at Sterling Financial, I didn't tell them. I let them believe I was still struggling, still taking classes, because I knew that if they realized I had money, they would bleed me dry.
Frank's threat today wasn't just about money. It was about control. He thought he still held the purse strings because he couldn't imagine a world where I didn't need him. He couldn't conceive of a reality where the scapegoat had outgrown the shepherd. The plane began its descent. I looked out the window at the sprawling clouds. The pain of that 10-year-old girl holding the ignored medal was still there, but it was quiet now. It had been replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a woman who managed billion-dollar portfolios. They wanted the audience to come home and clap for the star one last time? Fine. But they forgot that without the audience, the show is just a rehearsal in an empty room, and I was about to turn the lights off. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a file marked Personal Confidential. Inside wasn't a wedding gift. It was a dossier. It contained the financial autopsy of Frank and Deborah Burns. It was time to go to work. Before I engaged with the enemy, I needed intelligence, real-time, on-the-ground intelligence. And in the Burns family ecosystem, there was only one reliable source: Aunt Sarah. Sarah was Mom's younger sister, but they were as different as a shark and a dolphin. While Mom was obsessed with appearances and status, Sarah was grounded, sharp, and brutally honest. She was the only one who had sent me a card for my graduation, a graduation my parents didn't attend because Tyler had a stomach flu, which was actually a hangover. I called her from the rental car center.
"Bethany?" Her voice was warm, surprised. "I thought you were in New York. Is everything okay?" "I'm coming home, Sarah. Frank called. He threatened to cut my tuition if I didn't come to the wedding." Sarah let out a sound that was half laugh, half gasp. "Tuition? What tuition? Honey, those two haven't had a pot to piss in for years." "I know," I said, leaning against the counter as the agent processed my reservation. But he sounded serious, confident, like he actually believes he has leverage. "That's the delusion talking." Sarah lowered her voice, the universal sign that she was about to spill the family tea. "Listen to me. It's worse than you think."
They refinanced the house again last year to pay for Tyler's legal fees. You know, that DUI incident they hushed up? I didn't know, but I wasn't surprised. Go on. And this wedding, Bethany, it's a circus. Jasmine, that girl Tyler is marrying, she's demanding things that would make a royal blush. Imported flowers, a 5-course meal, a live band from the city. Frank is putting it all on credit cards. He's maxed out. I heard him arguing with the bank on the phone last week. He's terrified. So the threat against me is projection, Sarah said firmly. He feels out of control, so he's trying to control the only thing he thinks he can, you. He needs you there to keep up the facade of the perfect, successful family. If you don't show, people might start asking questions.
And if people ask questions, the house of cards falls down. Thank you, Aunt Sarah. That confirms what I suspected. Bethany, be careful, she warned. They are desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. They see you as a resource, not a person. Don't give them a dime. I won't, I promised. I'm not coming to pay, Sarah. I'm coming to collect. I hung up and sat in the car, a nondescript gray sedan I'd specifically requested. No luxury SUVs, no flash. I needed to blend in.
I needed to be the poor student. I opened my laptop again, tethering it to my phone's hotspot. I logged into the back end of my personal banking interface, filtering for incoming transfers from Frank or Deborah Burns. Last transaction, August 12th, 3 years ago. Amount, $200. Memo, happy birthday. That was it. Then I switched tabs. I logged into the secure portal of Birchwood Holdings, a subsidiary of the investment firm I worked for. My team had acquired a massive bundle of distressed mortgages in the tri-state area 6 months ago. It was a standard bulk purchase, buying bad debt for pennies on the dollar to either restructure or foreclose. I typed in the address, 102 Oak Street. The screen refreshed, and there it was. The status bar was flashing red. Owner, Frank and Deborah Burns. Status, default, 90+ days delinquent. Action required, foreclosure proceedings initiated. My breath hitched. They weren't just broke. They were actively losing the house. They hadn't paid the mortgage in 4 months. The bank, my bank effectively, had sent the final notice 2 weeks ago.
Frank knew. He absolutely knew he was on the brink of homelessness. And yet, instead of saving money, instead of asking for help humbly, he was throwing a lavish wedding for his golden son and threatening me with financial ruin. The level of cognitive dissonance was staggering. It was a form of madness. He was standing on a burning ship, screaming at me to scrub the deck. I looked at the foreclosure date. It was set for next Monday, 3 days after the wedding. They were throwing one last giant party before the lights went out, and they probably planned to use the wedding gifts, the cash envelopes, to try and bribe the bank at the last minute. Or worse, they planned to guilt-trip me into taking out a loan once I arrived. A cold smirk touched my lips. I remembered the times I begged for money for textbooks. I remembered eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner for weeks because I couldn't afford the campus meal plan. I remembered Frank telling me, "You need to learn the value of $1, Bethany." Well, Dad, I learned. I learned so well that I own your debt. I closed the laptop with a snap. The receipts phase was beginning. I had the digital proof, but I needed more. I needed to see it in their eyes. I needed to catch them in the lie. I put the car in drive. The GPS announced, destination Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Arrival in 2 hours. 2 hours until I walked back into the lion's den. But this time, I wasn't the lamb. I was the hunter. As I navigated the interstate, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Tyler. Subject line, wedding duties, mandatory read. I almost laughed out loud. Mandatory. I waited until I pulled into a rest stop to read it. The content was a masterclass in entitlement. It wasn't a request. It was a deployment order. Hey, Beth. Dad said you're coming. Good. We were worried you'd pull your usual disappearing act. Since you're not in the bridal party, Jasmine's sisters are prettier and fit the dresses better. No offense. Mom and I came up with a list of ways you can contribute to the big day. We know you don't have much money to give a big gift, so labor is your gift. 1. Airport pickup. Uncle Jerry and the cousins land at 6 a.m. Friday. You need to get them. Van rental is on you. 2. Set up cleanup. The venue charges extra for cleanup crew. We told them my sister would handle it. Be ready to stay until 2 a.m. 3. Designated driver. You don't drink anyway, boring, so you're driving Mom and Dad and the VIPs back to the hotel. 4. Important. Jasmine's dad is having issues with the honeymoon deposit transfer. Dad said you have good credit since you don't spend money. We need you to co-sign the travel package tomorrow. It's just a formality. Dad will pay it off next week. I read point number 4 again. Co-sign the travel package. There it was. The trap. They didn't just want me there to empty the trash cans. They wanted my signature. They knew, somewhere deep down, that despite my poverty, my credit score was pristine because I was obsessively responsible. They wanted to use my financial identity to secure a luxury honeymoon for Tyler and Jasmine, a honeymoon they clearly couldn't afford. Dad will pay it off next week. The lie was so blatant, it was insulting. Dad didn't have money to pay for his own roof next week, let alone a trip to the Maldives or wherever they were going. If I signed that paper, I would be on the hook for $10,000, maybe $15,000. I stared at the screen. my thumb hovering over the delete button. Why go? Why put myself through this? I could turn the car around right now. I could go back to my penthouse, order sushi, and watch the foreclosure happen remotely from my laptop screen on Monday. It would be cleaner, safer. But it wouldn't be enough. I needed closure. Not the warm, fuzzy kind where everyone hugs and cries. I needed the surgical kind. I needed to cauterize the wound so it would never bleed again. I needed to look Frank in the eye when he realized he had no power over me. I needed to see Tyler realize that being the golden child doesn't mean anything in the real world if you can't pay your bills. And I needed to protect myself. If I didn't go, they would spin a narrative. They would tell everyone I was the ungrateful daughter who abandoned them in their time of need. They would play the victim card so hard that the entire town would turn against me. No, I had to be there to reveal the truth. I had to let the bomb explode in the room so everyone could see the shrapnel. I replied to the email. I kept it short. See you Thursday. I didn't agree to the tasks. I didn't refuse them. I just confirmed my presence. Let them think I was compliant. Let them think the audience was falling into line. I pulled back onto the highway. The landscape was changing now, shifting from the industrial gray of the city outskirts to the rolling green hills of Pennsylvania. It was beautiful, deceptively so. This was where I grew up. Every landmark held a dual memory. The park where I played alone while watched Tyler's soccer practice. The ice cream shop where I was told smalls only, while Tyler got the triple scoop. My phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Hello? Is this Bethany Burns? A female voice, crisp, professional. Speaking? This is Mrs. Gable from Millbrook Realty. Your assistant, Claire, reached out to me regarding a potential property investment. She said you might be in town and wanted to look at some portfolio options. I smiled. Claire was efficient. Yes, Mrs. Gable, I'm looking for distressed properties, foreclosures specifically. I have a client interested in buying up residential debt in the area. Well, sadly for the owners, but luckily for you, business is booming, Mrs. Gable said. The market here has taken a hit. I have a list of pre-foreclosures. When can you stop by? Tomorrow morning, first thing. Excellent. Who is the client, may I ask? Birchwood Holdings, I said. But keep my name off the paperwork for now. I'm just the scout. Understood. Discretion is key in small towns. It certainly is, I whispered. I hung up. The pieces were falling into place. I wasn't just going to the wedding as a guest. I was going as a potential buyer of my childhood home. The irony was delicious. Frank always said he wanted me to take ownership of my responsibilities. Well, Dad, be careful what you wish for. I'm about to take ownership of everything, including the walls you're living in. Millbrook hadn't changed. It was frozen in amber, a mix of charming nostalgia and decaying stagnation. Main Street still had the same diner, the same hardware store, and the same judgment hanging in the air like humidity. I arrived on Thursday morning, checking into a budget motel on the outskirts of town. I could have stayed at the boutique hotel downtown, the one with the Egyptian cotton sheets, but that would have ruined the disguise. I needed to maintain the illusion of the struggling student for just 48 more hours. I changed into my costume, a pair of faded jeans, a simple white t-shirt, and a cardigan that had seen better days. I tied my hair back in a messy bun and removed my diamond stud earrings, replacing them with cheap plastic ones. I looked in the mirror. The CFO was gone. Bethany, the scapegoat, remained. It was frightening how easy it was to slip back into that skin. My first stop wasn't the house. It was the bank, the local branch of the national chain that my firm had acquired. I walked in, holding my briefcase. The teller looked bored. I asked to speak to the branch manager, Mr. Henderson. When I sat down in his office, he looked at my clothes with a hint of skepticism. How can I help you, Miss Burns, Bethany Burns? I placed a business card on his desk. Not my sterling financial card, but a generic one I used for field work. Birchwood Holdings, Asset Management. He picked it up, reading it. Then his eyes widened. He typed something into his computer. Birchwood? You guys are the ones who bought the non-performing loan bundle. Yes, I cut him off smoothly. I'm here to physically inspect some of the collateral before we move to the next phase of liquidation. I see. His demeanor changed instantly. He sat up straighter. We've sent the notices, Miss Burns. We haven't had much luck with compliance. People in this town, they're proud. They don't like to admit they're underwater. I'm specifically interested in the property at 102 Oak Street, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He typed again. Ah, the Burns residence. Wait, relation? Distant, I lied. Very distant. Well, that account is critical. They are 4 months behind. We've tried to offer a modification plan, but Mr. Burns, well, he hung up on my loan officer, called him a vulture. He seems to be under the impression that he can pay it off in a lump sum soon, but his credit report shows maxed out utilization across the board. He's expecting a miracle, I murmured, or a daughter to co-sign a loan. The foreclosure auction is scheduled for next month, assuming they don't tier the default by Monday, Mr.
Henderson explained. But frankly, looking at their financials, unless they win the lottery, that house is gone. Can you print the full ledger for me? I asked. I need the exact dates of missed payments and the total payoff amount, including the penalties. Of course. As the printer whirred, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. This wasn't just data. This was my childhood home. This was the room where I cried when I wasn't invited to prom. This was the kitchen where I learned to cook because Mom was too busy. Mr. Henderson handed me a thick stack of papers. Here you go. It's ugly. I flipped through it. It was worse than Aunt Sarah had said. They had taken out a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, and drained it all.
The withdrawals were labeled Classic Car Repair, Tyler's Mustang, University Club, Frank's Ego, Jewelry Store, Mom's Delusion. There were 0 payments for my tuition. 0. The threat Frank made on the phone was a complete fabrication. He couldn't cut my tuition because he wasn't paying for anything. He was bluffing with a handful of nothing. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I stood up, tucking the file into my bag. I'll handle the communication with the homeowners from here. Good luck, he said. Mr. Burns can be loud. I know, I said. I've heard him. I walked out into the sunlight. The evidence was in my bag. The receipts were secured. Now I had to face them. I drove the rental car to Oak Street. The house looked tired. The paint was peeling, the lawn was overgrown, but there was a shiny new Lexus SUV in the driveway, probably leased or rented for the wedding week to keep up appearances. I parked on the street. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the coming conflict. I walked up the driveway. I could hear voices inside, laughter, clinking glasses. I took a deep breath, put on my mask of the subservient daughter, and opened the door. And home, I called out. The laughter stopped. The silence that greeted me was heavy, thick with judgment. I stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me first, a mix of expensive floral arrangements, too many for this small space, and the underlying scent of damp old wood that they tried to mask with vanilla candles. Frank was sitting in his recliner, a scotch in hand. Deborah was fussing over a centerpiece on the dining table. Tyler was lounging on the sofa, scrolling on his phone. And there was a woman I assumed was Jasmine, examining her nails. Well, Frank said, not getting up. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my faded jeans and scuffed sneakers. A smirk curled his lip. Look what the cat dragged in. You look tired, Bethany. City life beating you down? Dad, I said quietly. Mom? Tyler? Deborah looked up, wiping her hands on a towel. You're late. We expected you by noon. Did you get lost? Traffic, I said. And look at you, she sighed, a theatrical sound of disappointment. Is that what you're wearing? We have guests coming over later. You look like you work at a gas station. It's just clothes, Mom. I've been driving. Tyler laughed from the sofa. At least she showed up. I bet she drove that piece of junk rental out front. I saw it through the window. A Kia? Seriously, Beth? He held up his wrist, flashing a gold watch that caught the light. Check this out. Rolex Submariner. Gift from Jasmine's dad. That's what success looks like. I glanced at the watch. From 5 feet away, I could spot the telltale incorrect magnification on the date window. It was a fake. A decent fake, but a fake, just like everything else in this room. "Nice watch, Tyler," I said flatly. Jasmine stood up and walked over. She was beautiful in a manufactured way. Too much makeup, hair sprayed into submission, clothes that screamed brand name a little too loudly. "So you're the sister," she said, not offering a hand. Her eyes scanned me like a barcode reader, calculating my worth. "Tyler talks about you, said you're the academic type." "I like to read," I said. "Cute," she dismissed me, turning back to Deborah. "Mom, the florist said the hydrangeas are wilting. We need to pay the expedited shipping fee for the replacements. It's another $500. Deborah flinched. I saw the panic flicker in her eyes for a microsecond before she covered it with a forced smile. "Of course, darling. I'll handle it. Frank, give me the card." Frank shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. Use the blue card, Deb. The other one is experiencing a fraud alert hold. Fraud alert. Code for maxed out. Actually, Frank turned his gaze to me, his eyes sharpening. "Bethany, why don't you handle that? Consider it a small contribution since you didn't bring a gift." Here it was. 5 minutes in, and they were already reaching for my wallet. "I don't have $500, Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm a student, remember? You threatened to cut my tuition. I'm saving every penny." Frank's face darkened. The vein in his forehead pulsed. "Don't get smart with me. You have savings. You work those little jobs." "I spent it on the flight and the car rental," I lied. "Useless," Tyler muttered.
God, why did we even invite her? "Because we are a family," Deborah snapped, though she looked at me with disdain. "Bethany, go upstairs and change. Put on something decent. Then go to the kitchen. The caterers need help prepping the hors d'oeuvres for the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. You're not a guest, you're help." I stood there, letting the insult wash over me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull the foreclosure notice out of my bag and slap it onto the coffee table. I own this house. I own the chair you're sitting in, Frank. But not yet. The timing had to be perfect. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll go change." I walked up the stairs, the creaking wood familiar under my feet. I went into my old room. It had been turned into a storage unit for the wedding favors. Boxes upon boxes of personalized chocolates, silk ribbons, and engraved champagne flutes filled the space. My bed was buried under tulle. They had literally erased my existence to make room for Tyler's party. I closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from rage. I pulled out my phone and texted Claire. "Status update. They are drowning. They just asked me for $500. Proceed with the final paperwork. Have the legal courier on standby for tomorrow night." Claire replied instantly. "Copy that. You okay, boss?" "I'm fantastic," I typed back. "I'm just watching the circus before I burn down the tent." I changed into a pair of black slacks and a silk blouse. Simple, understated, but high quality. If they knew fabric, they'd know the blouse cost more than Tyler's fake watch. But they didn't know quality. They only knew flash. I went back downstairs to the kitchen. For the next 3 hours, I chopped vegetables and arranged crackers while Tyler played video games and Mom drank wine, complaining about how hard it was to plan a wedding. I listened, I observed, and I waited. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Gilded Oak, the most expensive steakhouse in the county. I knew for a fact they couldn't afford this. Frank must have called in a favor or opened yet another credit line with a predatory interest rate. The room was dimly lit, filled with Jasmine's family, who all looked like they were smelling something bad, and our relatives. I sat at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door, next to Cousin Mike, who chewed with his mouth open. I watched Frank hold court at the head of the table. He was in his element, flushed with alcohol and attention. He stood up, tapping his glass with a fork. "Attention, everyone," he bellowed. The room went quiet. "I just want to say how proud I am," Frank began, his eyes misty, "to see my son, Tyler, marrying such a beautiful woman. Tyler has always been special. He's a leader, a man of action. He reminds me of myself at that age." He paused for laughter.
A few people chuckled politely. "We've spared no expense for this week," Frank continued, puffing out his chest, "because family deserves the best. We built this life with hard work, so our children could soar." Then his eyes landed on me. The warmth vanished. "And Bethany is here too," he said, his tone dropping. "She made it back from her studies. We're glad you could take a break from your books to see what real life looks like, sweetheart." A ripple of awkward laughter went through the room. It was a public dig, a reminder of my place, the nerd, the drain on resources. I didn't flinch. I raised my glass of water in a mock toast and took a sip. "Enjoy it, Frank," I thought. "This is your last speech." Under the table, my phone was recording audio. I shifted my focus to Jasmine. She was sitting next to Tyler, but her body language was off. She was angled away from him. She kept checking her phone, hiding the screen under the napkin. Every time Tyler tried to kiss her cheek, she pulled away slightly, smiling a tight, fake smile. "Excuse me," I whispered to Cousin Mike. "I need the ladies' room." I slipped away from the table. I didn't go straight to the restroom. I lingered in the hallway, watching the reflection in a decorative mirror. A moment later, Jasmine stood up. "I need to powder my nose," she announced loudly. She walked past me, barely acknowledging my existence, and pushed into the bathroom. I waited 10 seconds, then followed. The bathroom was empty except for us. Jasmine was in the handicap stall at the end. I quietly entered the first stall, locking it silently. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I heard the distinct sound of a phone unlocking, then Jasmine's voice, low, urgent, hushed. "I can't talk long, he's making another speech." "No, the wire hasn't come through yet. His dad said it would clear by Monday." I know. But look, the ring is real. I checked it. And the car? Well, the car is a lease. I found the papers in the glove box." My eyes widened. She was vetting them just as hard as I was. "Babe, don't worry," Jasmine hissed. "As soon as the wedding checks clear, I'm transferring the cash to our joint account. We'll have enough for the ticket to Cabo. I just need to get through the ceremony. These people are idiots. The dad is a blowhard, and the son is a golden retriever with no brain." I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. She wasn't just a gold digger. She was planning to run. She was going to take the gift money, the cash guests brought, and vanish with a boyfriend. "I have to go. The sister is lurking around. She gives me the creeps. She stares too much." I heard the toilet flush, a decoy, the latch click, and the sound of heels clicking on the tile. The door opened and closed. I sat there in the silence of the stall. I had a choice. The moral part of me, the part that was still a sister, wanted to run out and tell Tyler, "She's using you. She's stealing from us." But then I remembered the email, mandatory duties. I remembered the threat, "I'll cut you off." I remembered the foreclosure notice. I remembered Frank's speech mocking me 10 minutes ago. If I told them now, would they believe me? No. They would call me jealous. They would say I was trying to sabotage Tyler's happiness because I was bitter and alone. Frank would scream at me. Mom would cry. Tyler would probably hit me. They had to see it to believe it. They had to fall into the pit they dug. I unlocked the stall door and stepped out. I looked at myself in the mirror. My expression was calm, stone cold. "Let it burn," I whispered to my reflection. I walked back into the dining room. Frank was ordering another bottle of wine, one that cost $200. "Ah, she returns," Frank shouted. "Bethany, we were just talking about the honeymoon. Tyler and Jasmine are going to the Maldives. Where did you go for your last vacation? The library?" "Actually," I said, sitting down and smoothing my napkin, "I went to the bank." "The bank?" Tyler laughed. "To ask for a loan?" "Something like that," I smiled. "I love looking at numbers. They tell such interesting stories. Don't you think so, Jasmine?" I looked directly at her. Jasmine froze. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She saw something in my eyes, a glimmer of knowledge. She swallowed hard. I hate math," she stammered. "That's a shame," I said, slicing my steak. "Because in my experience, if you don't do the math does you." The tension at the table spiked, confusing everyone but me and Jasmine. Frank was too drunk to notice. Enough riddles, Frank waved his hand. Tomorrow is the big day. Bethany, remember, 8 a.m., you're driving your mother to the salon. I'll be there, I said. I wouldn't miss tomorrow for the world.
Tomorrow was Friday, the day of the wedding, and also the day the bank usually processed final demand letters before the weekend. I had the foreclosure notice in my hotel room, I had the recording of Frank's threat, and now I had Jasmine's secret. I had a full hand of aces, and Frank was betting with Monopoly money. The morning of the wedding was chaotic. The air at the house was thick with hairspray and desperation. I played my part perfectly. I drove Mom to the salon, I picked up the dry cleaning. I was the silent, invisible servant they expected me to be. But the real show began at 4 p.m., 1 hour before the ceremony. We were in the bridal suite at the venue, a historic mansion that cost a fortune to rent. Tyler was pacing in his tuxedo, looking pale.
Frank was red-faced, arguing on his cell phone in the corner. "What do you mean declined? Run it again. It's a bank error," Frank yelled, slamming the phone down. He turned to the room. The florist was standing there, arms crossed, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Burns, I can't release the centerpieces until the final balance is paid. The card was declined." "It's a glitch," Frank shouted. "It's $2,500, the florist said calmly. "Cash or a valid card, now, or I pack up." Frank looked at Tyler. Tyler looked at Mom. Mom looked at the floor. Then 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. I was standing by the window, adjusting my silk cuff. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit, androgynous, sharp, powerful. I hadn't worn the bridesmaid dress they wanted. I told them it didn't fit.
Bethany, Frank said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, coercive tone. Come here. I walked over. Yes, Frank? Give her your card. Excuse me? Your credit card, Frank hissed, leaning in so the florist couldn't hear. Pay the woman. I'll write you a check on Monday. I can't do that, Dad. Don't lie to me. He grabbed my arm. His grip was painful. I know you have a credit card. You have savings. Pay it now. And if I don't? If you don't, Frank's eyes bulged. I swear to God, Bethany, I will cut you off forever. No tuition, no inheritance. You will be dead to this family. You are ruining your brother's day. He's right, Beth, Tyler chimed in, sweating. Don't be selfish, just pay it. It's for the family. Selfish? I repeated the word.
I looked at Frank's hand on my arm. Then I looked at the florist. I think you should leave, I told the florist. Excuse me? She asked. Leave the flowers, or take them, I don't care, but give us the room, I said with such authority that she blinked, nodded, and stepped out, closing the door. I pulled my arm away from Frank's grip. You want to talk about money, Frank? Let's talk about money. I walked over to my bag, which was sitting on the velvet chair. I unzipped it. The sound was loud in the quiet room. What are you doing? Mom asked, her voice trembling. You threatened to cut my tuition, I said, pulling out the first document. But here is a bank statement from your account. You haven't sent me a tuition check since August 12th, 3 years ago. You spent that money on Tyler's truck. I dropped the paper on the table. Frank stared at it. You threatened to disown me, I continued, pulling out the second document, the foreclosure notice. But you can't disown me from a house you don't own anymore. I slammed the foreclosure notice down. The red stamp, default, was visible to everyone. What is this? Frank whispered, his face losing all color. This is the notice that your mortgage is 90 days delinquent. The bank is seizing the property on Monday. How did you get this? Tyler stammered. Because, I said, pulling out the final piece of paper, my business card, the real one, Bethany Burns, CFO, Sterling Financial, and attached to it, the deed transfer document showing Birchwood Holdings as the lien holder. I didn't need your tuition, Frank. I graduated top of my class. I make more in a month than you make in 2 years. And 6 months ago, my company bought your debt. The silence in the room was absolute. It was deafening.
Frank sank onto the sofa, his legs giving out. Mom covered her mouth with her hand. "I own the bank, Dad," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I am your creditor, and you just threatened your creditor on her collection day." "Bethany," Mom whimpered, You own the house?" "Technically, the company does, but I control the company, so yes." "So you can fix this." Tyler's eyes lit up with pathetic hope. "You can wipe the debt. You can pay for the wedding. Oh my God, Beth, why didn't you say you were rich?" I looked at my brother. The golden child.
Even now, facing ruin, his first instinct was to ask for more. "I could fix it," I said slowly. "I could write a check right now and save this house, save this wedding, and save your reputation." Frank looked up, hope dawning on his face. "Bethany, we're family, please." I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the neglect, the years of bullying, the stolen college fund, the threats. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "I could," I repeated, "but then I remembered what you told me when I asked for braces. Character is more important than money. So I'm going to let you build some character." I turned to the door. "Where are you going?" Frank screamed, scrambling up. "The wedding starts in 20 minutes. "I'm going to get a front row seat, because the fireworks are about to start. And trust me, you haven't seen the finale yet." I opened the door. "Oh, and Tyler?" I looked back over my shoulder. "Check your fiancé's phone. I think her cousin in Cabo is waiting for a wire transfer." I walked out. Behind me, the shouting began. I walked out of the bridal suite, and the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, muting the sounds of the panic attack unfolding inside. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror to ensure my composure was absolute, and made my way to the ceremony garden. The venue was breathtaking, I had to admit. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a golden hour glow over the white roses and silk ribbons that adorned every chair. It was a scene from a fairy tale, paid for with nightmares. Every petal, every crystal glass, every note played by the string quartet was funded by money that didn't exist, secured against a house that was already lost. I took my seat in the second row. Not the first row. That was reserved for the honored family members. I was just the sister, the bank, the executioner. People whispered as I sat down. I could feel their eyes. The stinky country girl, the failed student. Little did they know, the woman sitting with her legs crossed and her face impassive was the only person on this entire property who was solvent. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The string quartet began to luke the same Mozart piece for the third time. The guests started to shift in their seats. A low murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. "Where are they?" Cousin Mike leaned over, his tie already crooked. "Open bar doesn't start until they say I do." "Patience, Mike," I said softly. His skin was pasty, glistening with a sheen of cold sweat. He didn't look at anyone. He walked with a stiff, jerky gait, his eyes fixed on the ground. Then came Tyler, the golden child. He stood at the altar, but the arrogance was gone. He looked nauseous. He kept patting his pocket, checking for the phone I told him to look at, or checking for the reality that had just been shattered. He caught my eye. For a brief second, the mask slipped, and I saw pure terror. He knew. He finally knew that the safety net he had bounced on his entire life had just been cut. He looked at me with a pleading expression, a silent beg. "Fix this. You always fix this." I just smiled and adjusted my cufflink. "Not today, brother." The music swelled. The bridal march began. Jasmine appeared. She was a vision in lace and tulle, a dress that cost more than my first car. She was beaming, playing the role of the blushing bride to perfection. She didn't know yet. Or maybe she did, and she was betting on the sunk cost fallacy, hoping that if she just got the ring on her finger, the legal binding would force the money to materialize. She glided down the aisle, clutching her bouquet of orchids. When she reached the altar, she didn't look at Tyler with love. She looked at his wrist, at the fake Rolex. She looked at Frank, at the sweating, broken man. And then she looked at me. I held her gaze. I didn't blink. I raised my eyebrows slightly, a silent challenge. Did you make the transfer to Cavo yet, Jasmine? Or is the account empty? The officiant, a local judge who played golf with Frank, cleared his throat. We are gathered here today. The air was thick, suffocating. You could practically smell the ozone before the lightning strike.
Who gives this woman? The judge asked. We do, Jasmine's parents said in unison, oblivious to the fact that they were marrying their daughter into a financial crater. Tyler took Jasmine's hand. His hand was shaking so violently that the bouquet trembled. Tyler, the judge smiled. You look nervous, son. It's just a wedding. Tyler's voice cracked. He looked at me again. I was the anchor in his storm, but I was also the one who summoned the hurricane. He looked down at Jasmine's hand. Then he leaned in. I was close enough to hear the whisper, though the guests couldn't. I checked your phone, Tyler whispered. Jasmine froze. The smile didn't leave her face, but her eyes went dead. Not now, Ty. People are watching. Who is Carlos? Tyler hissed. Louder this time.
A few guests in the front row stirred. Frank stepped forward, trying to intercept. Tyler, son, focus on the vows. She's stealing the gift money, Dad, Tyler said, his voice rising, breaking the hush of the garden. She's transferring it to an account in Cabo. She's leaving me. The string quartet stopped playing abruptly. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. You idiot, Jasmine snapped, dropping the act instantly. Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was the shrill screech of a cornered animal. I'm not stealing it. I'm securing my future, because your sister just told me your family is bankrupt. The word bankrupt hung in the air like a guillotine blade. She's lying, Frank shouted, his voice cracking. We are the Burns family.
We are pillars of this community. Pillars, Jasmine laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. She turned to the crowd, addressing the bewildered guests. They don't own the house. They don't have a dime. The sister, the one they treat like trash, she owns the mortgage. She's foreclosing on them on Monday. Gasps erupted. Necks craned. Everyone turned to look at me. I didn't stand up. I didn't defend myself. I simply sat there, watching the chaos unfold with the detached interest of an investor watching a volatile market correction. Is that true? Jasmine's father stood up, his face red. Frank, is that true? Is my daughter marrying into debt? It's a misunderstanding, Frank stammered. Cash flow, liquidity issues. It's over. Jasmine threw her bouquet on the ground. She looked at Tyler with pure disgust. I'm not marrying a loser who wears a fake Rolex. I knew it was fake, Tyler. I just hoped the bank account was real. She turned and started to march back up the aisle. Wait, Tyler chased after her, grabbing her arm. Jasmine, please, we can fix this. Bethany will pay. She has millions. He pointed at me. Bethany, tell them you'll pay. The desperation was pathetic. He was trying to sell me to save himself. I slowly stood up. The crowd parted as I walked toward the altar. I stopped in front of my brother and his fleeing bride. I won't pay, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the garden. But I did get you a wedding gift. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I called the police 10 minutes ago, I said calmly.
Not for the noise, but because Jasmine, or should I say Sandra Williams, has 3 outstanding warrants for marriage fraud in Nevada and Arizona. Jasmine's face went white. She looked at the exit, then back at me. Run, I whispered. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, cutting through the murmurs of the scandalized guests. Jasmine, or Sandra, didn't wait. She kicked off her expensive heels and bolted toward the parking lot, holding up the skirt of her stolen dress. Stop her, Jasmine's father shouted, but he didn't move. In fact, he looked ready to run too. It dawned on me then that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Perhaps the whole family was a grift. Tyler stood alone at the altar, a groom without a bride, a son without an inheritance, a man without a spine. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "How could you?" he sobbed. "You ruined everything. You ruined my life." "I didn't ruin your life, Tyler," I said, stepping closer so only he could hear the steel in my voice. "I just turned on the lights. You're the one who built a castle out of garbage." Frank rushed over, grabbing my shoulders. "Call them off! Call the police off! Call the bank! Bethany, you have to stop this!" "Get your hands off me," I said. I didn't shout, but the command was so absolute that he recoiled as if burned. "You lost the right to touch me the day you chose a car over my education."
You lost the right to ask me for help the day you threatened to destroy my future to save your ego. Blue and red lights flashed against the white tent. 2 police cruisers screeched into the gravel driveway. Officers swarmed out. They didn't go for Frank. They went toward the woods where Jasmine had run. But one officer, a tall man I recognized from high school, Officer Miller, walked straight up to the altar. "Frank Burns?" "Yes." Frank straightened up, trying to summon the ghost of his authority. "Officer, this is a private event. My daughter-in-law is having a mental health crisis." "I'm not here for the bride, Frank," Miller said, pulling a folded paper from his vest. "I'm here for the caterer, and the florist, and the venue manager." "What?" "They called us."
They said check fraud. You wrote them checks this morning to get the doors open, but the bank flagged them immediately as coming from a closed account. That's theft of services, Frank. Grand larceny, given the amount. Frank's knees buckled. I was going to move funds on Monday." "You don't have funds on Monday, Frank," I interjected. "You don't have funds on Tuesday. You haven't had funds since 2019. Officer Miller looked at me, then back at Frank. "Mr. Burns, I need you to come with us to sort this out. We can do this quietly, or I can cuff you in front of your guests." "Don't cuff me," Frank shrieked. "I'm Frank Burns." "Frank Burns the fraud," a voice called out from the crowd. It was Mrs. Higgins, the town gossip. The dam had broken. The respect was gone.
Frank was led away, not in cuffs, but guided by the elbow, protesting weakly. Deborah collapsed into a chair, wailing loudly, looking around to see if anyone was pitying her. No one was. The guests were too busy filming with their phones. I looked at Tyler. He was sitting on the steps of the altar, head in his hands. "What do I do?" he whispered. "Beth, what do I do?" "You get a job," I said, "and you learn to walk." I turned to leave. The show was over. The curtain had fallen, and the stage had collapsed. But as I walked back down the aisle, a reverse walk of shame where I was the only one holding my head high, Jasmine's mother blocked my path. "You think you're smart, don't you?" she hissed. "Ruining love for money." "It wasn't love," I said, stepping around her.
It was a transaction, and the check bounced. I reached the parking lot. My rental car was blocked by a news van. Apparently, small towns move fast when the local royalty falls. I leaned against my car, watching the scene. The guests were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship, clutching their unopened wedding gifts, desperate to disassociate themselves from the disaster. My phone buzzed. It was Claire. "Update. The police apprehended the bride on the service road. Confirmed ID as Sandra Williams. She's singing like a canary. Says your brother knew about the scams." I looked back at Tyler. Did he know? Or was he just too stupid to ask questions? It didn't matter. Willful ignorance carries the same penalty as malice in the court of reality. I texted back, "Let the cops handle it. Proceed with the eviction notice for Monday. No mercy." I got into my car. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But it was a good kind of tired. It was the exhaustion of a soldier who had won the war and was finally going home. I didn't go back to the hotel. I drove to the only place in this town that held a good memory, the old library. I sat in the parking lot, watching the sun go down. And I cried. Not for them, but for the little girl who had waited so long for someone to save her, until she realized she had to save herself. The weekend passed in a blur of legal motions and silence. I didn't answer my phone,
which had blown up with calls from unknown numbers, probably flying monkeys sent by my mother. Monday morning arrived.
The day of the foreclosure. I didn't need to be there physically, but I needed to be there spiritually. I parked down the street from 102 Oak Street. At 9 a.m. sharp, the sheriff's deputies arrived. They weren't the polite officers from the wedding. These were the eviction squad. They knocked on the door. It took 2 hours. I watched as my childhood was carried out in boxes and black trash bags. The sofa where I wasn't allowed to sit. The TV that was always tuned to Tyler's cartoons. The dining table where I was told I wasn't good enough. It all looked like junk on the sidewalk. Tyler came out last. He was carrying a gaming console and a bag of clothes. He looked lost. He sat on the curb, staring at his shoes. A moving truck arrived, not for them, but for the bank's cleaning crew to clear out the debris so the house could be listed. I started my car and drove slowly up the street. I rolled down the window as I passed them. Tyler looked up, his eyes locked with mine. There was no anger left in him, just emptiness. "Bethany," he called out, his voice cracking. "We have nowhere to go." I stopped the car. "Mom is sick," Tyler said, walking to the window. "She's having panic attacks. Dad is broken. We need a place to stay, just for a week."
Until we sort this out, you have money. Put us in a hotel, please. I looked at my mother, sitting on a suitcase, weeping into her hands. I looked at Frank, staring blankly at the for sale sign being hammered into the lawn. "I can't do that, Tyler," I said. "Why?" he screamed, slamming his hand on my car door. "Because you hate us? Because you want revenge?" "No," I said calmly. "Because if I solve this for you, you will never learn. You've spent your whole life being carried. It's time to build your own legs." "We're family." "Family doesn't threaten to destroy each other," I said. "I am your creditor, Tyler, and the debt is paid. We are even. You gave me life, and I gave you a reality check. That's a fair trade." I handed him a card, not a credit card.
A business card for a local temp agency. "They're hiring," I said. "Warehouse work. It pays minimum wage. It's honest money. Try it." He stared at the card like it was an insult. "Go to hell," he whispered. "I've been there," I said, rolling up the window. "It's called 102 Oak Street, and I just moved out." I drove away. I watched them in the rearview mirror until they were just small, dark specks in the distance. The cord was cut. The weight was gone. I drove straight to the airport. I had a board meeting in New York on Tuesday. I had a life to live, a life I built, a life that belonged to me. As the plane took off, looking down at the patchwork quilts of Pennsylvania, I realized something. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore, and I wasn't the provider. I was just Bethany. And that was enough. But the story doesn't end with just me flying into the sunset, because karma, as I found out later, likes to be thorough. 6 months later, I was sitting in my corner office in Manhattan. The skyline was gray, covered in snow, but inside it was warm. My career had skyrocketed. The acquisition of the debt portfolio had been a massive success for the firm, and I had been promoted to senior partner. Claire walked in with the morning mail. "Personal letter for you. No return address. Postmarked from Millbrook." I knew who it was before I opened it. I slit the envelope. It was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was shaky. Frank's. "Bethany, I'm writing this from a rented room above the garage at your Uncle Jerry's. Your mother is staying with Sarah. We aren't together anymore. The stress was too much. I wanted to tell you that you were wrong. You were cruel. You humiliated us. But I'm working now. I'm stocking shelves at the hardware store. It's hard on my back." Tyler left. He took the car, what was left of it before the repo men got it, and drove west. We haven't heard from him. I don't expect you to reply. I just wanted you to know that I still think you owe us. We raised you. Dad. I read the letter twice. Even in defeat, even in the wreckage of his own making, he couldn't say sorry. He couldn't admit he was wrong. He still felt owed. That was the tragedy of the narcissist. They would rather freeze to death than admit they stole the blanket. I didn't feel anger. I felt pity.
Deep, profound pity for a man who would die thinking the world had wronged him, never realizing he was the architect of his own misery. I took the letter and fed it into the shredder. The noise of the paper tearing was satisfying. Zzz. Gone. I turned to my computer. I had an email from Aunt Sarah. Subject: Update on the Golden Child. Hi, Beth. Just thought you should know. Tyler got arrested in Ohio. Petty theft. Trying to shoplift electronics. He called me for bail. I told him to call his sister. Just kidding. I told him to call a public defender. Love you, kid. Come visit soon. I'm making lasagna. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that bubbled up from my chest. Tyler was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Frank was working for the first time in decades.
Mom was living with the sister she used to look down on. And me? I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Millbrook Youth Center. Hello, this is the director. Hi, I said. This is Bethany Burns. I'd like to make a donation. Specifically, I want to fund a scholarship program for students who excel in math but don't have financial support from their families. That's wonderful, Miss Burns. How much were you thinking? Full ride, I said. Tuition, room, board, and a small stipend for living expenses. For 4 students a year. Forever. There was silence on the line. Then, Miss Burns, that's incredibly generous. What should we call the scholarship? I thought about it. I thought about the gold medal in the drawer. I thought about the threat of cut tuition.
I thought about the foreclosure notice. Call it the Independence Fund, I said, and one condition. Yes, the students have to sign a contract promising they will never, ever let anyone else control their financial future. Agreed. I hung up. I walked to the window. The city lights were turning on, one by one, fighting back the coming dark. I had won, not because I was rich, not because they were poor, but because I was free. I checked my reflection in the glass. The scared little girl was gone. The angry woman was gone. There was just me, and the future looked bright. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to live, and it wasn't easy to tell.
But I hope it reminds you of one thing. Your value is not determined by how useful you are to people who don't appreciate you. You are the CEO of your own life. Don't let anyone else sit in your chair. If you made it this far, you are the real MVP. Come at the letter A below so I know you're a true survivor. And if you have a story about a toxic family member getting a reality check, write it down. I read every single comment. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the Ledger of Life. Until next time, keep your receipts.